too high.
It's sure it'll be fine. It's pretty close. It's pretty close. I'm going to probably pace. I am, like the paper said, and like the program says, and the way I've been introduced, Capt and Carr, and I am a Salvation Army officer, which means a couple of things, and most of it doesn't come very apparently from the title. So, as a Salvation Army officer, I'm the pastor and administrator, along with my spouse, along with Captain Brittany, for the Salvation Army, and we serve all of Bartlesville, Washington, and Osage County. And so we have a great staff, a great team that helps us perform and make sure all the programs and services are done, as well as a couple of large and very involved support groups through our advisory board and our women's auxiliary that help us get everything that is accomplished in the community accomplished. But when I show up, I'm different than our last person, and so we get transferred around a lot, and this community is different than a lot of other communities, and so it takes a long time to learn. We are on our third and a half year at this point. We moved here in June on Father's Day, about 3 years ago, and so we're still learning some about the community and learning a lot about Oklahoma, as I am not from Oklahoma. That part was correct. So I'm a fifth generation Salvationist. I became a Salvation Army officer about 8 years ago, which involves going through a seminary program, and then they send you somewhere. So the seminary was in Atlanta. My wife and I have been married for about 3 years when we were officially ordained and sent to San Antonio, Texas, where we spent 2 years, and then 2 years in Broken Arrow, and we're on our, I think this is the beginning of our 4th year technically here, but it's just started. And there's a lot of different things that Salvation Army officers do, and a lot of them don't often involve my main passion, which is teaching adults about Scripture, getting people excited about the Bible again. And so when I'm asked to come speak, I usually have to know how long because I'm a preacher by trade. And hope you all brought your Bible. And so it can be as long or as short as I need it to be, but it's often a little too long. So if somebody needs to wave me off at some point, just feel free to do that. We have a relatively small church, and there's often times we have visitors that come from the shelter and from the streets and different things that exist in Bartlesville, and just interrupt and ask questions and things. So if you feel like I've spoken too fast or been unclear or want some more information, just interrupt me, or we'll have time at the end as well. The Salvation Army in Bartlesville is unique because of the way the Salvation Army is structured. But every Salvation Army in every community in America and across the world has the same foundational reasons for doing what we do. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about the why, exactly what we do, and how people can get involved in ways of supporting that work. So the Salvation Army is first and foremost a church, started in 1865 by a Methodist minister who wanted to be a traveling preacher, and the Methodist church said, no, we need you to preach here. And eventually he got frustrated by that and just started preaching in the streets. And back in the 1860s, there were problems just like there are today. And he got really discouraged by how the church was not just making money off of where wealthy people were sitting versus poor people, but who was allowed in church and who was allowed to certain services and different parts of church ministry, and was able to receive good teaching. So he just started preaching in the streets. And just as if I was today, that generally would go over really well with a lot of people, who'd rather be frustrated or just ignore me. And so what he realized is that in the West End of London, where it was a particularly impoverished and difficult place to be, people weren't listening because they were hungry. They weren't listening because they were addicted to drugs or alcohol. They had other concerns. Some of them weren't sure if they were going to survive the night or where they would stay. And so he realized that if people wanted to hear a message of hope for tomorrow, he needed to help them with something today. And so he actually is the reason that soup kitchens really became popular in London and around the world. He started the first sort of work-for-bed soup kitchen and gave people not just food and not just to help, but actually empowered them. He gave them work. He wouldn't just let them come sit and eat, or they weren't really satisfied just to come sit and take a bed, but he would empower them and say, okay, help me sweep, and we'll give you food and somewhere to stay and get cleaned up. And hopefully something like that would encourage them, or just plant a seed, come listen to him preach. And that sort of snowballed because it was very effective for them. And so he was very, very good at finding new ways of doing things, which is somewhat ironic because the Salvation Army is pretty old-fashioned in most of what we do. But he was quite the innovator. He is the reason safety matches exist. because most matches were made with phosphorus and still are a type of phosphorus. And they were mostly made in factories by children, and that phosphorus would leak into your bones and into your jaw and it would kill you. And so he found a way, he found a chemist, he hired him, they worked together and they came up with what are now safety matches. And not just came up with a safer way of making matches without killing people, he created factories that gave kids and adults a livable wage. And said, come make your matches in our factory, and then he had them, and they were called In Darkness England, and he would distribute those, and they had a scripture verse on them, and it was your way out of the darkness. And from there, it just kind of kept going. He created sexual trafficking initiatives to try to break into the sexual human trafficking industry in London at the time, which was riddled throughout the whole country. And people just were compelled and they were attracted to this, and the Salvation Army began to grow. And it became what was eventually called the Salvation Army. So, first and foremost, we're a church, and our goal is to find ways to alleviate concerns that people have in their life, material, spiritual, whatever it is, and hopefully they'll come listen to us preach. Hopefully they'll go somewhere and listen to somebody preach. That's why the Salvation Army exists and why we do what we do. But every community is different. The needs in every community are different. The way the Salvation Army operates in Bartlesville is a lot different than it does in Tulsa, just up the road. Because the needs here have similarities, but what we're able to do to meet those needs is slightly different. But it all comes back to this platform of can we help alleviate a concern for today? So the Salvation Army has several different services and different ways that we try to help Washington and Osage County, and they've been established for a long time. We first and foremost have our church services. We have Sunday night, we have Bible study, we have youth services that we try to teach kids about Jesus and try to engage that, but nobody is required to be a part of that. If you want to be a part of the services or you need help from us, none of that matters. Just come to help. Hopefully, just that little nudge is enough to get people to find Jesus. So if you're not coming to church, how else do we help? Well, we have a few things. Most of it is relatively simple in concept, and depending on how organized the clientele is, are relatively easy to work out. But we help people with their utility and their electric bills through the financial donations of our donors, of our supporters, of our partner agencies, and through us. Mostly, a lot of legacy money, we're able to help people pay their electric bills that might not have water or power for the next couple months. And they come in, they go through a process making sure that we can not just help them, but we also look at their budget and try to encourage them to find ways to not be in this situation next month. And we also are able to help them with food. So we try to get families groceries for a week, at the very least. So they come in, they tell us a bit about the demographics of their family, and we're able to create a basket of groceries for their whole house for the week. We can only do that once every few months, unfortunately, just because we would probably be feeding the whole city at some point if we're not careful, and we don't have the resources for that. But we work with the food bank, we work with Mary Martha, we work with a lot of the different groups in Bartlesville to make sure that we can do that. And through the Salvation Army and then the other agencies that serve people in this community, people can be relatively well taken care of. Unfortunately, I think the big hurdle in this is that we have also kind of established an easy way to stay in poverty, because we just constantly give stuff out. And as much as me as the preacher would say, okay, I just want them to come listen to me preach, it has created, I think, a long-standing problem for our community and for our country, and we are actively trying to find ways to get people out of that mindset. And a lot of that begins with the kids. And so we have an after-school program and then a summer program where we work with kids right now. Oh, I should have written down the ages. I think it's 6 to 12. And so we pick them up after school. They come and they have a meal, actually, which was never designed. It just sort of, we realized a lot of these kids come back hungry because they're kids and they're growing, but we don't know what they're going back to, and our program is free. And a lot of our children come from families that are already clients in some way and need help. So we don't know what they're going back to, and they end up usually having a lovely meal. In fact, one of our staff yesterday, she got there a little early and just had some bags with her and decided to make homemade pasta. I don't know how to do that, and I don't have the patience for that, I don't think. But the kids seem to love it, and so they had kind of homemade chicken noodle style pasta. It was good. I don't know what it was, but it was good. And that was just because she personally felt like they could use a warm meal on a cold, blustery day, and that wasn't what we had planned. And so the hearts of the people that work for the Salvation Army are a big piece of this, or a big component of this. But after they eat, they're able to engage. We have a character building program. It's very similar to things like Scouts, for both boys and girls. But it's biblically based, and they're able to get exposed to different skills and different activities. There's things like basket weaving and nature guides and carving and fire starting. And then there's also other stuff like learning from the Bible. And we're hoping to expose them to more STEM stuff. I, for my entire upbringing, studied for whatever reason. As about a 12-year-old, I knew what I wanted to do in university. I was going to go into computer science. I built my first computer when I was 6. I loved it. Technology just speaks to me. And then in 12th grade, probably because I was at a calling from God to do something for the church, I realized that couldn't be for me, and I went into Near Eastern Archaeology program at university. So I studied archaeology at university, particularly for the Near East, which links up to the history of the Bible very well, and I feel it was a misunderstanding on my part before I ended up going to seminary. But I loved it. And so I have a weird passion for history, but I also love computers and tech, and we're hoping to get kids involved in other STEM activities and to link that up with the schools as well. We can teach them all sorts of things from music. My wife and I, Salvation Army has a long history in music. This is kind of rambling at this point. We'll get back to the actual, what we're supposed to be talking about in a second. Salvation Army has a long history in music. One of the things our founder did to get attention in the streets was he found people who knew how to play loud instruments, very loud instruments. And he would take old bar songs, and he would give them Christian lyrics, and just stand outside the bars with these little quartets of brass musicians and make as much of a noise as he could. And so there's an old English bar song, pour another one, drink it down, and he changed it to storm the force of darkness, bring them down, and it's a very interesting song. And so a lot of Salvation Army kids learn to play brass instruments. So we have a suite of brass instruments. 2 years ago, we started a trumpet class, which are actually made of plastic at this point because kids drop them, and they're expensive, and plastic bounces. So we're able to teach them any brass instrument, really, piano, guitar, bass guitar, and as well as we can do 3D printing, laser cutting, computer programming, whatever the kids feel like we have a way of engaging them with. A lot of this they have opportunities in school, some not till later in school, but the big point of that is the more options the kids have, the more things they can try, the more likely they are to find a natural aptitude for something. And if a kid knows they're good at something, if they find a natural aptitude for something, whether it be a sport, or reading, or art, it doesn't matter. If they know they're good at one thing, that will improve their confidence and make them overall more successful in school. And it's a simple thing. It doesn't have to be an involved program, but if 1 week we do programming and they're like, oh, this just makes sense to me, because for some people it does. And if 1 week we do basket weaving and it just makes sense, it gives them that confidence, and it can help them in math, it can help them in English, it can help them in all of their academia. And it's really important. Yeah?
How many children do you serve?
There's only about 13 right now. The program was on hiatus for about a year because of staffing problems and COVID. And we finally got it back. Salvation Army has a very strict child care policy because not only as a nonprofit are we a high target for lawsuits, we're also a church, which is a high target for lawsuits, and we work with kids. So they have a very strict policy, which basically is I need 2 adults for any number under 21 kids. My buses are included in that, and they only seat 14 kids. So for me to operate a program of up to 30, I need 4 staff. It's very expensive. So we're growing, we limited the staff, we just added the second bus and a new staff member to make sure that we can maintain those ratios and let it grow up to the capacity of the vehicle, of the next vehicle anyways. So we can have up to about 28 right now with our staffing, and we just added our 13th or 14th kid, I can't remember. Yeah?
And volunteers?
Yes, if you're willing to sit through our 45-minute training class, which is part of a background check and child handling policy. Yeah. And our ops managers trained to train that, which is the most consistent way to have somebody around you to do that, because we leave. And unfortunately, we move around and we try to leave that foundation here. Yeah, absolutely. So if we can engage the kids in a new attitude, we're really excited to be able to do that. It happens not with all the kids very successfully, but we've had a few already this school year that have kind of come out of their shell a little bit and just playing a new sport. And just being engaged in something like European handball or racquetball or pickleball or something like that. They'll probably never play some of these again, but they know they can do it. And so we have our youth program, we have our church programs, we have our direct assistance programs. Most people know the Salvation Army because of Christmas. Somebody mentioned that you're slowing down this part of your season. This is where our season goes a little crazy. Excuse me. We have this altar in our church, and I pace a lot. And I always we're going into our kind of crazy season, and so there's a lot of ways to get involved with the Salvation Army, but the most of them happen during this time of year. And it's even more busy because our Women's Auxiliary, which is one of our big support groups, has a biannual garage sale. And they pack the building out with stuff and outside of the building. And that usually happens in August, but we were really kind of not sure about numbers and things, and so we waited until it was a lot safer to get people through the building. And so unfortunately that's like this weekend. So if you're looking for some fun stuff, there's a lot of stuff in our building, and all day Friday and Saturday until 5 o'clock. Come to the Salvation Army and please buy stuff because I need it out of the gym. And it goes to support the Women's Auxiliary, who are specifically there to be able to engage the programs of the Salvation Army. So the Women's Auxiliary raises money for the Salvation Army, and they are able to do things like buy a t-shirt press that we wouldn't normally budget donor dollars for. Well, they support us, they raise money, and they get to allocate funds to the Salvation Army to use for passion projects, for regular ministries, things like that. And so, because we're completely donor-driven, which a lot of agencies are in our town, we try to be careful with those kinds of things. Careful with everything, really. So, you can come and you can get involved with all sorts of stuff, but it is Christmas, and people know us most for our Thanksgiving meal, for the Angel Tree program, and for the bell ringing. For better or for worse, we're generally known for the noise we make at Christmas. And I'm very sorry, I didn't design the bells, I know they're piercing. They roll in my car all year. But the bell ringing is probably one of the most well-known and one of the most misunderstood parts of the Salvation Army, because most people I interact with assume the money in the bucket goes to help the Angel Tree program, like to buy the toys. And it doesn't. Almost ever do this. And so the Angel Tree program is a fascinating program that actually was started here in the South, in Tennessee, by a Salvation Army officer. Right about the same time, the prisons also started a program called the Angel Tree. And so we both have an Angel Tree program, and we're both technically licensed to use this brand and use it, but if anybody else has one, it's ours. But what it is that the families apply for Christmas help. And we do this year, in the last 2 years, we've done it all through the month of September. They have the whole month to figure this out. And if they can prove to me they live in our service area of Washington, Osage County, that the children that they are applying for help for actually are, for lack of a better phrase, belong to them through guardianship or through parenting, and that they've already received some form of assistance, that's basically all we need, and we will make sure that their kids get toys for Christmas. And this community is generous enough that the kids not just get toys, but they get good toys, and quite a few of them, and usually a lot of clothing. The Angel Tree program is designed to give them toys, but it's not a dream factory. Like, we just can't, and kids want expensive stuff. My kid is 6, and the stuff that he's asked for is insane, and they're still toys, thankfully, and not like computers and things. He said things, but he doesn't know that. And so they asked for, we try to maintain this as well. So we have to do a lot of sort of triage and work with the applicants and with their applications to make sure they're reasonable. I can't in good conscience ask a donor to provide 10 tablets for this poor woman who has 6 kids and 4 foster kids, which is a legitimate candidate this year, or applicant this year. And so we try to make those gift requests within $40 to $50. That was really good about 6 years ago. Now that's kind of tough, actually. And so we're looking at that. But when somebody applies, they tell us what their kids might want, maybe a genre of something they want, their sizes and things. And unfortunately, most of the people that apply don't know that information. The amount of parents that come that have no idea what size their children wear. I say this, I'm really bad at knowing what size my kids wear. But that's because I'm bad at remembering things. But it's difficult. They have a hard time getting this to us. So it takes a lot of work. It takes us about a month just to let them all filter in and go through and help get the right paperwork from them and all that. But once they're in, they basically just wait. And then the community comes and they adopt the angels. I'm sure you've seen the tree, and they provide it to them. Now, when those come back, we specifically ask they come back not wrapped, because unfortunately there are not good people sometimes. And we have found across the last 8 years all sorts of stuff in these bags that kids should not have. Used toiletries, we found pornography, we found all sorts of stuff. So that's why we ask them not to be wrapped. We're not giving that to the families. But it pretty much, aside from something illegal or nefarious, if it's in the bag, it goes to the family. If one donor decides to give that family a MacBook, which has happened before, they get a MacBook. But there are toys that are donated that are undesignated, and we use those to supplement, because also really well-intended people will take that angel off the tree and buy them a pair of socks and a stocking stuffer or something, but that angel's now off the tree. So we have also a suite of tags that go out that go to supplement that, so that every kid gets 3 to 4 toys and hopefully at least a whole outfit and some shoes to go home to their family. That is all because the community steps up to give us those toys. We don't actually spend any money on this. And so we buy boxes and bags and stuff, but that's about it. And so when we give out the bags and we give out the toys on December 18th this year, as we do every year, we tell a little bit about why we do it as the Salvation Army, our calling, our passion for Christ, and alleviating that concern from their life. But we also basically say, thank the community, because we just facilitate a safe transaction from a stranger to your children. The community provides all of this. And they provide the funds we use to buy the bags too, so it's literally everything. But the money that goes in the buckets of kettles are used for our programs and services year-round. So aside from our partnership with United Way, it is the primary way that we get funding. All of the programs and services that we have year-round are basically funded in some way by the Red Kettles. And that is sometimes surprising to donors and to supporters. It's also sometimes scary, because nonprofits are kind of all over the place in how much they use those funds for programs. And the Salvation Army, on average, uses 82 cents of every dollar within the community gets donated for programs and services, which is, if not the best ratio for a nonprofit in the world, it is one of the top 2. We're very effective with those dollars, and we make sure they stay in our service area. So if you're putting money in a bucket this year, you can be confident it goes back into programs and services in our area, and that it probably doesn't go to Angel Tree, at least not this year, because we're already kind of done with that part of it. We're just waiting for the toys to come back now. Those are the ways most people know about the Salvation Army. We have a lot of opportunity because of how generous the community is to help people with just emergency things. We've worked with Stump Funeral Home to help people cover funeral costs, which is one of my wife and I's big passion. My wife lost her father when she was about 24, and her mother has never been a part of their life, and was utterly shocked at how much it costs to deal with that. And I'm sure most of you have been through this, but if you've ever dealt with burying a loved one, there's an almost crazy commercial industry in trying to upsell people with, and we try to advise people on how to work through that and work with the funeral homes, and both Stump and Davis are very good at working with us to make sure that this is something they can afford and we can help them with that financially, as well as just be around for funeral and for pastoral care and whatever we can. We're able to help people with emergency funds for things as they come up. During the COVID year, we were able to help cover people's eviction costs, which isn't typically something that our funds are allowed to be used for. Donor stepped up nationally and gave everybody, so we received $8,000 in Bartlesville and used every penny of it to stop families from being evicted during kind of the height of COVID 18 months ago. We had people who had landscaping businesses that were just sort of shattered because everybody was home cutting their grass. And they were about to lose their home. Lovely couple, had kids, just like about 3 months with no income. And they were on default, and so we were able to, even though there was eviction bans and stuff, the landlords are still really hard on them because they also need to make a living. And so we were able to support them in that. Last year, we helped about 1,700 people, 1,696 people with financial assistance, or with food boxes, which totals about $135,000 in direct assistance to these clients. last year we also brought in just under $60,000 in the red kettles. And so a lot of our support comes from donations throughout the year. It's just one of the most well-funded Salvation Armies in Arkansas and Oklahoma for just regular support donations. We don't rely too much on Christmas kettles, on the bell ringing, because the community supports us throughout the year so well. During COVID, not only did people like Be United Way and other groups step up and just provide emergency funding where we needed it, the community continued to give, where we were being told from our headquarters, go find new donors, go reach out because people are at risk of closing their doors. And I was like, ours has stepped up. Like, it's a very giving community, and because of that, we're able to help thousands of people every year with hundreds of thousands of dollars without having to worry about things like Christmas. It's a wonderful place to be. The Salvation Army in Bartlesville is very, very unique in that it relies on that. One thing that we've seen this year is a great hike in the amount of money needed per client. So we've actually seen less clients this year than we did last year, but the average cost of helping a family has gone up. And that is because so many of them didn't have to pay rent for so long. But now they're all catching up with this. And unfortunately, most of the clientele that we serve are the people that are gonna say, well, there's a ban, I don't have to worry about my rent, and they literally don't worry about it. Like, they just ignore that it exists or will be an expense later. Yeah, there's a ban, but that money's still piling up. And so one of the things that we're excited about this year is starting in January, we're working with Arvest, who's gonna help us provide financial training, money matters, how to think about money and basic budgeting to our clientele, but not just to the clients, but to the kids. And so one thing that the Salvation Army has tried to figure out, along with lots of other smart people way, way outside of Bartlesville, is how do we deal with generational poverty? How do we get people out of the mindset that this is just how life is and it's okay? Like, you can live better than this. There's so much more to life than this. We have to help address it with the families and support them while they're there, but we also need to train the kids and help them get an idea of what to expect and how to work with money. And so we're starting that. Arvest is coming in. We have a team of people that will be offering classes through the Salvation Army. And there's lots of other places that are doing this. Arvest is doing this, lots of other people. But the more that we can blanket the community with this, and they're doing it for free, it's all free. We're very excited about that. That is something that those kind of creative ways of working with us to help people grow out of poverty is hugely needed, not just in Bartlesville, but just across the country right now. It is one of the biggest problems that we're facing as a nonprofit working with the lower class community. How do we encourage them to get out of that? It's so difficult. And so over the next couple of months, you'll see the Salvation Army a whole lot more because of Christmas. And you'll also notice that we have a lot more digital things happening now. The Salvation Army, I like to say, exists in the generation of our territorial leader, who is the man who's over all the southern United States, the couple that's over all the southern United States. So we're usually about 30 years kind of behind the curve of technology, but we're getting there. And so this year we have a lot more digital options to get involved. But what we need is really people and advice and always, unfortunately, cash. But it's the people who are willing to give their time. We, a few years ago, had I actually don't know what this person's job was. He worked for a university in Houston, and he came to talk to us because it was a bunch of pastors, all the Salvation Army officers from Arkansas and Oklahoma. And he said, it's often easy to get people's money. It's really hard to get their time. And because my wife and I don't stay here, we try to leave the big vision of where the Salvation Army should go with the staff who have lived here and invested in this community for so long. And a big thing that we need is help brainstorming and planning on how to get people out of generational poverty. If this is something you know people who work on, just download it, come see me, because I could use all the advice in the world. But as we wrap up, I would just ask that you remember us this coming season. If you're interested in helping, you can volunteer to ring bells at registertoring.com. These are all over them. You'll see them all over the community. You can adopt angels online this year as well, as the trees will be up in a couple weeks. Give to the buckets and help volunteer ring. That would be huge. 2 hours from a donor from a volunteer is usually as effective as about $600 from a donor, because they bring in so much when they're engaged for a couple hours. And join us for our Red Cup kickoff at me, which will be online this year as we sort of kick off our Christmas season.
Yeah, real quickly, November 24th.
November 24th. Thanksgiving?
Yes.
Our Thanksgiving meal.
Yes.
Our community meal. We feed we do a big community meal, which this year I'm pretty sure is going to end up being chicken, unfortunately. I would much prefer that anyways, but turkeys are hard to get right now. So, if you want Thanksgiving meal or you want to help feed the community, we usually feed about 300 people. Come to the Salvation Army early in the morning on the 24th. Or call them, I'll tell you more.
Thank you, Ian.